Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, doing pretty well. Does anyone have a question that you want to share?
I have a few.
Okay, sure. Go right ahead.
Okay, so for the first question, on one of the pages, maybe on your sharing your screen, maybe somewhere on there, it said
Okay.
healthcare system SWOT analysis assignment. And I think that threw us a little bit. Like, are we supposed to do a SWOT?
So I'm not 100% why that's here.
Okay.
A SWOT analysis is typically completed in a marketing class. And I don't know if he was thinking that you were going to think about it in that aspect. But then I came back when we were coming up with it and I said, a critical analysis really would make sense because you're critically kind of analyzing the different analyses that we went through and thinking about how you might use them, what things you would need to collect to do one, things like that. And so we kind of bounced it back and forth. And so it was kind of left as a SWOT critical analysis. So if you have taken marketing, if you enjoy doing SWOT, you could discuss these questions using a SWOT format. You could also do a critical analysis. This assignment is meant to be the subjective response to the objective escape room assignments. So on those, you had specific things that you were required to do. And if you did those incorrectly, then you couldn't get the code to move on to the next one, and they were very rigid. And economics, while it can be rigid, it can be data oriented. It can also be very qualitative. I've done several studies that are just extremely qualitative in nature. And so combining the two is sometimes really important aspect in gaining an understanding and how you might use them in the future. So that is really the goal of this assignment. And if you'll notice, there are just 3 questions here, and they're meant to be really open-ended. And so you're going to find that the paper that you create, if you were to look at another group's paper, if you have a friend in the class, you're going to find that the papers don't look the same at all. And so that is on purpose. That is to help you to understand, because economics used to be a sociology subject. It was not, it was definitely just a complete social science. Looking at the way people just, made decisions. Why are we purchasing it at this store rather than this store? Why are we buying from Amazon rather than eBay? Things like that. And as time went on after World War II, they started using it to gain funding in the US for the government. And so they started adding all of this data in because they could justify purchases. They could justify doing projects. And that's kind of when it kind of shifted over. And, you could call it its own discipline. You could say it's a part of finance, a part of business. I've taught economics for a long time, and it surprises me at the different departments I've seen it in. So it really encompasses a lot of different things. And that's what this assignment is. It's allowing you to kind of think about those decisions. Would this, type of analysis be great where I work? Would it not be? And that's the purpose of the assignment. So I hope that helps to answer your question about SWOT or critical analysis. It's really up to you is the answer.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have something you want to ask?
I've got a few questions. Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to control the whole meeting.
Oh, no. No, I didn't want to interrupt you because I know you said that you had a few. I just had a question on our references. A couple of the ones that I found for my part of the paper are in 2018. I didn't know if that was too late of a date, if you want something more recent.
No, that is fine. With COVID, some of the data, specifically wasn't collected. And so some of the stuff, especially data-oriented stuff, is a little tough. Even when I'm doing stuff, it's kind of hard to get it super current. I would probably like you to cut it off at 2017, 2018 if you're using data. If you're doing theory, if you're going to talk about an economic theory, the use of a different analysis, that's the same. So you could use an article from 1960 to talk about the theory behind using an analysis. But if you're pulling data and you're putting data in something, we do have an appendix where you're going to add data. We want that to be a little more current, because before a certain number of years ago, it's like apples and oranges. It's not really relevant to economics today. So,
Okay.
Okay, I have a question. So on the critical insights prompt, what were the most critical insights in conducting your analyses? Do you have any suggestions on what we should focus on, or is that too much of help?
so critical insights, if I were writing it, because you're probably only going to get, a page and a half on each one, I would pick one of the analyses that you wanted to discuss that you think you might use in the future, and I would really dig into that one. Really, the critical insights that I think are just super important are considering, like on the CEA, we looked at hand washing before and after, and the critical insight that I would first think of is, why would you look at the before? You already knew there was a problem. And a critical insight there would be, data, of course, is important to show whether this project was worth it. And it helps people in charge deciding whether they're going to invest in a project or not, to know where you're at before you can figure out where you're going. And so that would be, an area that I might find useful in digging into. You can kind of select your ones. If you didn't find that to be a critical insight, you wouldn't have to use that. That was just something that, as I went through it, I think in business, you don't do stuff like this. You would do it in a class. If you taught the class, you would do it. But when you're out in the real world, you have things to do. I would say most of where all of you work, you're busy. And so to pay people to come in to tell you how badly you're doing at something, it's painful. And so that's why it gets skipped over. And I think a lot of times that's why, a project is just kind of, conducted. Oh, we're having issues here. And then there's no way to really track whether what you did is valuable. So then you get 2 years down the road and say you have hand washing issues again. How do you know whether you really improved? Was it just you knew somebody was going to come around and be checking you? Is that what improved it, or was it really the project? And so that to me was a pretty important insight. You can select, whichever was most important to you. If you work somewhere, there's going to be things where you can kind of link where you work with one of the techniques, because everywhere you work is going to be interested in costs. And, that's going to be something you could look at, because primarily, even in that first one, you had a wide range of costs for those projects. And while you cut off one because it was too expensive, there were several others that were really quite pricey. And so just thinking about just the narrative in terms of cost is important as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That really answered all of my questions.
Okay.
That was great. Thanks.
Okay, good. Okay. Anyone else have a question?
Hey, Professor Jantz, this is Holly. Can you hear me? Hey, thank you. So we'll just skip down to the next question. In my group, we were discussing, wanted a little bit of clarity about which benchmarks were not addressed. So our question was, when you're looking at the projects and you've got some other options, like there was hand hygiene, and then there were some other areas that we really weren't addressed in the escape room. Are we specifically talking about the ones on the project? Or are we looking at outside of the project, like let's say communication as being a benchmark that we would?
Communication would be great. You
Okay.
could do either. And that's why I say this
Okay.
is very open-ended. You could do ones you hadn't selected for these. You could go out on a limb, you could do communication. You could, I mean, I think you could even look at hiring trends, things that, you know, definitely were not considered in any of these, because those impact hand washing, you know, those impact everything we're doing. And so it's open-ended. You pick
Okay.
what is relevant to you. Like if you know, were to work, if you have a desire to work in HR or something like that, that may be interesting to you. The way the assignment is usually split up is 1 or 2 people do each question. And so
Sure.
it's perfectly acceptable to have someone address an area that doesn't necessarily tie in with the other questions, just because, you know, they are so open-ended. One thing that I do want to point out before I get another question, just in case I forget, I know you all see the reference section and no one's ever forgot the reference section at all, but oftentimes you forget the appendix. The appendix is an important part of the grade, important part of the rubric. And so don't forget to add data. You can do tables, you can do graphs, you can do pictures even. And some students will add just, here's what we did in the class, and they'll just put, you know, here's my results from the CEA. And that's really not what this is looking for. This is looking for tables that go over either another analysis, say you looked up an article about a CBA and the results on that. You could talk about, you know, kind of what that means and how they used it differently than you did or something like that. You could also, what I've seen some students do that's fabulous, is you could make a table with the 3 techniques. You could look at the data you had to collect, because while that was there for you this time, that part is the hardest part of all. Like, well, what data will I actually need to run this in the future? You know, will I need all the costs? Well, what do those costs look like? You know, you think of the cost of the employee and the cost of the project, but beyond that, it's like, it's hard to really think of, well, what would I need to calculate, you know, the qualities? What would I need for this? And so some of that can help you, not necessarily for like this class again, because you'll be done, but it'll help you because you will see for sure the CBA you see again in capstone, and there are parts of the other 2 that you'll see again. And so it helps you to have a framework. And so I always recommend this, the table, because that way you take that with you and you're like, what did I need for this other one? Because a lot of times your files, because they keep those passwords forever. And if, you know, if you can't get back into those passwords, you're like, what did we have to do there? And I don't know exactly how the capstone is set up. So I don't know if they give you all of that again or not, but you might have to go out and collect some data of your own. And that will help you to know what you need to collect. So that way you're kind of prepared. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, I'll go over this part. The paper is 5 pages. You're gonna probably go over. Don't be worried if you go over. It's kind of hard to answer all of this because, you know, they're double spaced and such. You only need to have 1 group member submit the paper for the whole team. But you do your peer eval separately. So you're going to submit a peer eval on your group. And if there's somebody in your group that's not, you know, cutting the mustard, you put that on there. This is not a free ride for anyone. And so everybody needs to do an equal share, and that equal share may be editing. If there are serious editing issues and you feel like that's going to be a concern, someone that does the editing is a valuable, you know, contributor to the team. But if there's somebody that just really doesn't participate well, fill this out and make sure it's specific. No one else sees this form and no one will know who gave who a score. I don't release that. If there was a student that came to me that was very upset about their score, it would never be discussed. We would not discuss it. And so feel completely confident in sharing what happens in the groups, because I don't know. And we used to do a group paper, and it was not an escape room at all. It was just a group paper. And there were so many issues, but then when the peer eval came around, everybody would get perfect scores. And so I know that, you know, there's that not wanting to truly reflect on how the group worked together, but it's important for you too, because if you're adding a bunch of work and not everyone is, you know, don't tell the whole group, gee, I'm grading this person lower. Just do it. You know, do what's fair, because we need, if you're going to go to work and you're going to have an employee that's not doing, you know, what they need to do, you're going to have to, you know, talk with them about that much more confrontationally than this. This is a good first step to really say what is, you know, in the group. So I'm trying to think of anything else. There really isn't a whole lot else. The writing and the data visualizations. Let's say you put a graph in here. Have you done graphs in a paper before? Maybe.
I haven't.
Okay. Okay, if you haven't done those before, those can be a little tricky.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go over here. And I feel like the OWL is the best, and I can't remember if it was the OWL or APA. Okay, this is really helpful. So you can read about it here. And Purdue has just arguably the best setup as far as explaining APA formatting. You can also go to our library, but they just really have it all right in front, and they give you explanations and examples. So you're going to write whatever it is, you know, you could write table 1, figure 1, it doesn't matter. And then do the title. The title should be in italics. This should be bolded, and I don't necessarily care if it is, but please put this in italics. And then at the bottom, if you want to explain what you're showing here, this would be a place to do that. You could say, this relates to our current, you know, our CBA from this class, and I felt like it was beneficial to explain how it's used in a different situation or something like that. You wouldn't need to add any more like this. So it's pretty simple process. And then at the end of the paper, you'll do just a regular reference like you would anywhere else. Let's see. I think that is really about it for this assignment. It's very fun. I think they're fun to read. Once you submit that, I'm going to go through and I'll make notes in the paper and in the feedback box, and I will send that back. And I'm not sure what it is, but I think there are some terms where students are able to share that with one another. I don't know that each group member is able to see the write-up. You can see the comments in the box, but not the write-up. So whoever submits it, have them kind of be responsible for getting that back to you. So that way you can all see what, you know, what I wrote in there. They're usually all really positive comments, but it's kind of good, you know, when you see your own, you know, comments. So, and then when you submit it to TaskStream, what I want is that one, the one that has the comments in it. And I know that think that's true in every class you take. It needs to be the one with the comments. So make sure it's the one with the comments. And then you'll submit your reflection from the peer review. You do not have to submit your peer review again. You'll just submit your reflection, which is kind of how you felt about the project, how your team worked together, that sort of thing. I'm sure you've done it in other classes. And then you'll have your compass assignment And then that is all, and that is in week 7. Not this week, but in week 7. That's our big kind of project in week 7 is the task stream papers. Because we will have like a quiz and a discussion board, but that's really it. Like this is the last true assignment in the class. So congratulations, you're almost through.
I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay, just for clarification purposes. So we are doing a critical analysis of one. We're selecting one of the analysis and we're focusing on that. Is that right?
You can do an overview of all, or you could select one and dig deeper. It is up to you. If you think, like, personally, I would do the CBA every time, just because wherever you work, you're going to see it. You're going to see it in healthcare. You're going to see it in business. You're going to see it in economics. You're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see it again in another class. So if you want to dig deep in one, I would pick the CBA. The CEA maybe second, just because you do see it more. The CUA is a type of CEA, but it's used less. And so I would pick one of those two, just in thinking about your future. But if you have used, a CUA in the past, definitely go for it. And then when it talks about other analysis tools, a lot of students use cost consequence, cost minimization, things like that. Those are other analysis tools. As an economist, I would use regression or ANOVA or time series. Those would also work. So it's open-ended there as well. Just whatever tools, think about where you work or go through some of the research and see if they talk about one that you enjoy. If you feel like never going to use any of these, let me know and I can give you some examples. But usually cost consequence or cost minimization are the two biggies that are discussed here. And once again, you can talk about two briefly or one a little more fully.
Okay, thank you for that. And my second question is just going back to the question with the benchmarks that we're not addressing the assignment. So are we looking for benchmarks that were not addressed specific to the analysis that we choose? I don't know if I'm asking the question correctly. I'm not sure.
No, you're just talking about benchmarks in
general.
Yes, in general.
Okay.
If you work in healthcare, there are a lot of different benchmarks. A lot of times, they focus on quality. They can focus on care. They can focus on, communication. There's a number of them. You could even, go beyond that to areas maybe that you see that aren't a traditional benchmark. Just things that you've noticed that seem to be a general concern, things we're talking about. It's pretty open because we're just talking about improving outcomes. So what might improve outcomes?
Okay.
Communication's a really easy one, just because I feel like there's a lot of struggle with communication. I think our world in general is becoming less connected. And as we're less connected, communication gets so hard. And as I work at home, I notice like my communication skills are sometimes just not where they need to be. And so, I mean, since COVID, it's gotten worse. But yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, because when I was first thinking about benchmarks, I was like, okay, patient wait time, like patient room turnover rate, medication error rate. Those were the things that came to mind. And I was trying to think, okay, does it have to be related, to the specific analysis, or are we talking just in general?
Just in general.
Okay, thank you.
Just saying, Professor Jantz, you'll probably see that from my group communication.
Okay, that's great. I see that one a lot. And truly, I think if there was a way, to make these classes more communicative, I feel like that's everything this program needs. And
Right.
so definitely, like, that's just the one that always comes to mind. I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's one thing
Right.
we just all can use, more skills in. And every time I see a new article about some way to improve stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I could read that.
Right. Right. It's true. It's true. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So did you say cost benefit analysis would be a good one to focus on?
It usually is, not just because you're going to be doing it again at capstone, but it's one that's done in almost every business in some form or fashion, because it's simplistic. You can look at it in terms of, we did as the cost benefit ratio. I've done it before with different weighted costs and benefits, and just done a straight, let's look and see which is the highest here. We also had you calculate the NPV, which is another way it can be done. And so it's getting you to start thinking, how might this be used? And you could look up, what I do a lot of times is I go to Google Scholar, and then you could look up, just type in cost benefit analysis in the last 5 years, and it'll tell you, tons of places that it's used that's been published. And then as you start to look at those, you can kind of see, oh, well, I've kind of seen that at work. We didn't call it that. We may not have formally done the analysis, but we definitely did that. And so that's an easy way to kind of dig in to see places you might have seen it before.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Professor Jantz, are we required to have, or is there a certain number of references that we should have?
No, you should have a reference section, but it's really what you use. There's really no requirements there. Just make sure that you reference them using APA format, and you're all set. I mean, you're not going to have one or two, you'll have more than that, but you're not going to have, like in the group paper, you're not going to have 30 references for this either.
Thank you.
I'm going to sign off, Professor Jantz. Thank you so much for your
Okay,
time.
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything that you want me to go over before we go?
I had some technical difficulties, so I missed out on a lot. My computer froze up, so then I have to come on through my phone, and now I've got both of them up, trying to figure out what's going on.
That's how. Did you have a question?
No, well, nothing specific. I think my group had a Zoom, and I had to go into the office today, and I didn't get back until after 7. So
I think we're gonna get on Zoom again after this, so we can catch you up.
Okay, thank you
Is
so
that you,
much.
Wanda?
Yes, it's Wanda.
Yeah, we'll send out another link to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, good. Well, basically just a brief overview. This is meant to be a very subjective assignment. The escape room assignment was objective and required you to have correct answers and all data. And this is the open-ended response. It's allowing you to synthesize, which in my mind is the whole reason for a graduate education, is to take a tool, learn a little about it, and then learn how you might use it and bend it different ways and see how it might work for you. And so this is your opportunity to synthesize. You're only given 3 questions. There should be someone probably working on the appendix, which is your data visualizations, someone doing editing. You can split any of the questions up in multiple parts if you want to. This one's an easy one to split into if you have, more, I guess, more team members. Some teams have 4 and some teams have 5. And so if you wanted to have somebody do, data, someone, do each question, you have that 5th person. And this is a good one that you can split into 2, just because someone could do a different analysis tool. So that would probably be my recommendation, unless you do feel like, hey, my writing skills aren't that great. We really need an editor, an only editor. And that person would probably need to be on Sunday. So somebody that's gonna, get it taken care of. I recommend you submit all of your sections to your group leader by, Friday or Saturday. So that way you have plenty of time for someone to edit it. So it'd need to be somebody with good writing skills and somebody who's available on Saturday or Sunday for the editing. Or you can edit one another's work. Sometimes that's a little trickier just because you are in a group situation. Having one person do it seems slightly more objective. If there are things that need to be corrected, a lot of times it has to do with references. They're either missing or, not complete. And so whoever's really good at references would be a good pick for that.
I have one question, Professor Jantz. Will you send the recording out? I think I missed the first 3 or 4 minutes. I was having trouble logging in.
Okay.
Are you able to send the recording out?
Well, I had someone a couple of terms ago that asked a question that felt uncomfortable with me sharing it with others because they felt like their question was not a good question or something. And so I don't want to upset anyone. Would anyone here be upset if I sent the recording? This would go, I'm teaching 3 sections. There's maybe 70 students. Would you all be okay with me posting this in an announcement?
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it.
Yes. I'm
Yes,
good.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Anyone not okay with it? Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead. It does record automatically. I usually just delete it. I don't save these just because, I definitely did not, no questions ever done, especially when we're doing class remotely. So there's things that just don't translate well remotely. And so I just don't ever want anything that comes across in a video to be seen that way. But as long as you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and post it. If you see it posted and you get uncomfortable with something you said, let me know and I will take it down from all sections. So just want to make sure that you know that, it's definitely to help and no question is stupid. So don't feel like anything you asked tonight is that way at all. So.
Thank you.
Does anyone have anything else before we go? Okay, well, I thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you enjoy writing the papers and I hope that it helps you to think critically. If there are questions you have as you go through some journal articles, send them over. A lot of the analysis data type questions I can answer. Some of the ones specific to certain areas I may not be able to answer, but all the data type stuff I can, help you understand kind of what they're saying. So I hope you have a good evening and we'll see you in the classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.